Hi and welcome. It's really good to have you here. This course is for leaders wanting to develop their personal leadership effectiveness in engaging their teams and building an engaging culture. What we're going to cover today is a little bit on what is engagement, and then we're going to look in more depth at leading for engagement and effective and engaging line management. Then we'll cover off some how-tos and provide you with some action planning activities. So, the organisation has 4 things to think about. The ability to tell a clear and compelling story to all its people about the organisation's mission in life, what's really important to its purpose and why, and also the goals it set itself to get there. How it makes sure it's properly and meaningfully involving its people in shaping and designing the way in which the organisation can best achieve its purpose and meet its goals. Demonstrating to its customers, communities, partners and its team of staff day in, day out through the decisions made and the actions taken and the priorities it has and how they align to its values and its mission. Ensuring that everyone in the organisation reports to a leader that shows up as a proper human being that values them enough to make sure they're properly supported and empowered to do the work they need to do, and to do that work in a way that works for them as much as for the organisation. That they have a leader who wants to see them rise to their true potential and succeed. That they have a leader that wants and needs their help to get the job done. There's so much information out there already for you to read and digest about employee engagement for organisations, but what we're going to focus on today is how you do your job as an engaging leader. So, let's get cracking. Think back to the best line manager you ever had. What did you see in them? What did they stand for? What made you feel this way about them as your line manager? And what was the impact on you? I bet they valued you. I bet they were energised. I bet they always had time for you. I bet they noticed you and spoke to you like they really saw you, really wanted to know you, really wanted your help to get the job done. And I bet you felt appreciated and valued, special even perhaps, noticed. I bet you felt motivated and capable, competent, willing, productive. What were they doing that was bringing all that out in you? They were communicating with you. They were interested in who you are, what you think, how you feel. They supported you by showing you how you could build on your strengths, by getting alongside you and coaching you through tough times or new experiences. They were honest with you, negotiating with you when they needed something from you, prepared to tell you if things weren't working and asking how you thought things could improve. They were probably as flexible as they could be about how you used your time to get the job done in order to improve the chances of you finding a balance between work and home, giving you extra breathing space during periods of stress or difficulty. I bet they were true to their word and acted with integrity, consistent in thought and deed. So there are 4 things you really need to demonstrate in order to be an engaging leader. Number 1, you show a genuine interest in each person in your team. You get to know them. This doesn't need to mean you find out everything about their family life and hobbies in great detail, although let's face it, we spend so much of our lives together, it's a bit odd to show no curiosity. People do have whole lives and you can't support them as real people unless you know a little bit about what rocks their world. It does mean getting to know who they are professionally, no question, how they see their role, what they identify with as a professional, why they turn up into this organisation, how they see the organisation and the people in it, how they relate to the politics, the mission, the values, their own vision for success. Number 2, you need to develop each and every person on your team, no question. Not by sending them on sheep dip courses or waiting for the annual appraisal. If you're doing development well, there are no surprises at appraisal time and everyone is relaxed and comfortable about going through the process. Development happens every single day in how you delegate work, how you get alongside and understand the way your team members prefer to work, and how you help them tackle the work. Their strengths, their weaknesses. You know you're good at developing them when they feel comfortable giving you feedback and are not afraid to speak up and give their opinion. When they're willing to get behind you when the going gets tough and they're prepared to tell you when things aren't working. Number 3, you need to know enough about each team member and their life to know what work-life balance needs to look like for them and figure out the best way to accommodate their needs in line with organisational need, of course. You need to be paying enough attention each day, each week, week in, week out, and checking in often enough to recognise when they're under pressure or under stress, and be the person to gently let them know you're aware and work quietly with them to temporarily adjust the work, the quantity of it, the deadlines, the expectations, until they've moved through their time of stress. Number 4, you need to make sure you are true to yourself, that you're acting with integrity all the time, that when you face a dilemma where there are no right answers, that you make the decision that most speaks to the values and purpose that you stand for. Does your organisation espouse work-life balance, for example, well-being and flexible working? But are you working 12-hour days, skipping lunch, stressed out, emotional, fretting about your own work at 9 in the evening? If any of that is true, your team will know it. It means you're not acting with integrity. And when it comes to supporting them with their work-life balance, you won't have credibility and trust unless you've got your own work-life balance prioritised. Treat people right all the time. Think carefully about including everyone and don't just rely on the usual suspects. Back yourself, speak the truth, and back the organisation. What each of these has in common is that each of these is an act of engaging communication. And each of these steps builds relationships and builds trust. The foundation of an engaged team consists of trust. If this foundation fails, the team will fall apart. So we're about to work through more detail on the 4 things you need to do to up your engagement. But before we do that, I just want to take stock for a moment of where you are currently. Just take a moment to reflect. It'll help you to write down somewhere some of your thoughts. What were the challenges you had with your line manager or supervisor in your last role that impacted on your own engagement levels? Now, as a manager, what challenges can you see in your team? Is there any correlation between the two? Do some of the ways your own line manager disengaged you show up in your team? Could you be repeating the same patterns? How comprehensively and how often do you really show up for your team? How often do you ask for feedback and seek their input into how you can be a better leader? How much of your time each week or each month do you devote to helping them develop? I'll just give you a minute now just to jot down some of your thoughts on that. So, what's the key to all of this? The key to your employee engagement superpower is being of service to your team. How do you really know what they need? Spend more time communicating on the level of relationship rather than always focusing on the task. Communication is an act of collaboration or cooperation around a task. Basically, at work, we're there to get the job done. And when we speak to somebody, it's usually because we need their help in discharging a particular responsibility that we have. So it's a collaborative effort when you communicate with someone. It's about working with another person in service of the task. It's very difficult to collaborate without a positive relationship. In collaboration, we get to learn more about the other person's ideas, thoughts and concerns, their hopes and aspirations. So spending more time in communication, focusing on relationship rather than just task, helps us build up a more engaging culture. Generally, on a day-to-day basis at work, we're always in communication, talking about the task. But what greases the wheel, what makes cooperation and coordination possible, is effectively the relationship between us. So the ability to communicate effectively with integrity and trust is really, really important to building an engaged team. You know that your team need to build a bond with you on a personal level in order to be able to give of their very best, to be truly engaged in the work and to follow you. You empower them by your relationship with them that you build. These relationships that you have with the individuals on your team imbue your team members with a sense of success and give meaning that goes beyond the task you're working on. It speaks about shared values, shared purpose, shared hopes for success, that you, their leader, needs their help, values their input. So this is about demonstrating through how you communicate that you genuinely value the other person. This is giving people time and really wanting to actually know what the other person thinks. This is really seeking their help in getting the job done, just like your best boss did for you. But how often do conversations feel like a kind of a race to the finish line, a need to be right? We go into conversations thinking we have to get something out of it. That's usually validation that we ourselves are right. And that's very often at the expense of us making the other person wrong. If you want to be right about knowledge or opinion, well, that's okay. And in certain circumstances at work as a leader, you do need people to just do what you need them to do. But often when we're seeking cooperation in getting a task done, when we're busy trying to be right, we might inadvertently be making our team members feel wrong. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to people feeling overlooked and undervalued and definitely not engaged. So to be an engaging leader that people look up to, you don't want and need to be right all the time. Thinking about the task as being in the middle of yourself and the other person makes a barrier in how you approach that relationship or that conversation about the work. The task is literally getting in the way. Starts thinking along the lines of being at the other end of the spectrum, who is right and who is wrong. Division is never a great start to a conversation and gets in the way of any best intentions you might have. The task is a barrier between you before you've even started. But if you look at the slide here and notice in the second picture, there's no me and you. There's only me and us. From this perspective, the questions I have for me and for you are, what do I want? How do I feel? What outcomes do I want? What do we want to achieve together? How does this relationship between us feel? Is this communication going well for both of us? What outcomes do we want from this conversation? In this situation, we're both right. There's no division. There's no me versus you. And you're lessening the chance of conflict and competition a great deal by taking this collaborative stance. Now then, good leaders focus on the needs of others, don't they? And the one-to-one is the perfect time for this. I think the one-to-one is a very misunderstood creature. We're not really shown how to deliver a good one-to-one unless we're lucky enough to have had an exceptional leader ourselves and have learnt from the best. But really, one-to-ones were invented for focusing on the needs of others. They're the place you show that support for the other person by focusing on their strengths and their challenges and showing them how they can reach their potential. This is the place where you get alongside your team members, you coach, you cheer them on, you champion them, you advocate for them. This is where you discuss what more they need to do and what more they might need from you in order to improve their performance. Actually, it's a pretty sacred space, and it's not something you should cancel on or avoid. Don't cancel one-to-ones. If you do have a meeting clash, move the one-to-one, but don't cancel it. It isn't your meeting, it's theirs. Let them have the meeting. Value your team members enough to be prepared to make this meeting about their agenda. So put their agenda first. Ask them to provide the agenda for each meeting. Avoid the temptation to use it as a status update. This meeting isn't about a task so much as about the relationship. The person in front of you isn't there to run through their task list so you can get an update and feel like you're back in the loop. If you stick to to-do list conversations, what you're really doing is giving them a signal that you're avoiding the relationship with them. So, usually in a one-to-one, there are 4 areas of concern for a member of staff, and it's your job to make sure that in talking through their agenda, each of these areas is touched on. Their development. Here's where a coaching approach can help them. Their career growth. Here's where you can facilitate their ambitions. What can you do to help? Their ideas for the team and the organisation. How can you support their ideas to be heard in the organisation? What conversations and meetings could you construct to help that team member get their ideas in front of the right audience? And relationships. If they're struggling with relationships or wanting to build better relationships or suffering in the balance of relationship with home and work life, your wise counsel and support can make all the difference. So the third gift here is the gift of giving support. Now, being supportive is about recognising your team member as a full member of the human race first. Getting to know enough about them that you notice when they're off key, off balance, or something is wrong. Knowing them well enough to judge when is the right time to approach them and how to inquire about their well-being in a way that they feel supported enough and trusting enough to say what's wrong and what it is they need from you. This is where you come into your own as an enabler, as an empowerer. Do they need headspace? How can you give that? Are they hurting emotionally? How can you hear that and handle it with empathy and sensitivity? Perhaps they're overwhelmed or overstretched. Might you be contributing to that? How? What can you do to make life better and less stressful for that person? This is really about accountable behaviour, caring for the well-being of your team in a proactive and energised way, making sure you're in a position to be this supportive for everyone in your team. That includes the people that are less like you and not naturally a comfortable relationship for you. And finally, give purpose. This is all about acting with integrity. It's pretty hard to get fully engaged in what you're doing without a trusting relationship with the organisation and your line manager, as we've just been exploring. Everything we've talked about has been rooted in building trusting relationships by demonstrating that you value and care about the work your team do. But it's all for naught if you aren't role modelling the values that you stand for yourself. There's no point in telling the team you will support them in times of crisis if you aren't seen to support yourself in times of crisis. If you're incredibly hard on yourself when you're stressed, if you overwork when you feel overwhelmed and anxious to the point of burnout, that will count for more than any words you have to say about managing workplace stress or letting people work flexibly. You absolutely have to be able to do what you say. When you're consistently acting in alignment with your values and your purpose, people can trust you. This is particularly important during times of uncertainty. Being able to rely on your leader is often the most important thing when everything else is up in the air. Leadership is in the small acts, much more than the big ones. There's no silver bullet to acting with integrity. You always know when you are and when you aren't. It's a personal decision to maintain your integrity, and there's no way round it. It's in the small things you say and the choices you make in your everyday habits. Who you talk to, who you don't talk to, what upsets you, which decisions turn into dilemmas that you struggle with, what you say about people and situations. So here's a summary list of 10 things you can do in your ordinary everyday activities as a line manager to act as a more engaging manager. These are 10 everyday areas where you can be mindful of your approach and make sure that you're doing your best to use the 4 gifts. Give care, give development, give support, and give purpose. So let's just recap what we learned. The secret to being an engaging manager is in building trusting relationships through good communication. There are 4 ways you can do that with your team through giving the 4 gifts of trusting communication. 1. The gift of care. Spending the time to really get to know the person in front of you, showing up with curiosity and valuing what it is they bring to the table. 2. The gift of development. Making sure you treasure and protect the time you have with your direct reports, helping them grow, learn, and achieve their goals. 3. The gift of support. Learning to read what's happening with your team members and being able to address the concerns you have for their well-being. And 4. The gift of purpose. Making it clear what you stand for in your actions as well as your words. So I've prepared a workbook with an exercise for you to do related to each of the 4 gifts. Relationship building is something we can all learn. Try out the exercises and then commit perhaps to implementing. One thing you already do well in terms of communicating with your team, one thing you do some of already but could do more of, and one thing from the workbook that you haven't tried before but would like to include in your leadership and consciously add it in. So let's get down to business. Download the Build Engagement Workbook. It contains guidance, resources, and some practical exercises to help you implement some of the learning from this short course. These exercises aren't an exhaustive list of things to do, but they are all skills that contribute to each of the 4 gifts. Remember, small things have big impacts. When you try out these skills, remember that. Small changes can have huge positive outcomes for your team members. You don't always have to make a sea change to make a positive, tangible difference to your team's experience of being at work. Complete the action learning matrix first. What do you feel now you've done the course? What ideas do you have about how you're going to engage your team? Some of the tools for change and possibilities this opens up for you. What's the skills gap? What's going to be difficult for you in doing this practice? And what are the questions you have which will form the basis of your own further independent learning? So complete the matrix to clarify what resonates for you, what you have questions about, and what more you want to explore. Then take your time with the exercises to follow. What gets in the way of positive and collaborative conversations at work? What negative feelings or experiences do you carry into different types of conversation, and how do they impact on the way you come across? Think about the people in your team and what similar barriers and negative feelings might be getting in the way of their ability to engage in some conversations or activities. What can you do to facilitate better communication, more collaboration with each person in your team? So that's the gift of care. Second exercise. How consistently do you give honest feedback to your team members? How confident are you about giving and receiving feedback? What can you do to build your feedback skills and make sure that feedback is seen as a gift in your team? And that's the second gift, the gift of development. Then, what can you do to make sure your team feel confident and secure sharing any problems they may have? What can you do to help them see that you will give your best counsel, advice, and practical support to make a positive difference to a team member in need of some TLC and to help make their life work for them? That's the third gift, the gift of support. And finally, why did you get into leadership? What are you trying to create? Who are you trying to help and why? What's important in the work you do? What does your chosen field bring that satisfies your value set? What's your purpose beyond this leadership role? What's going to drive you forward for the next several years, and what fulfills you? And this is the fourth, the gift of purpose. So each of these pieces in the workbook is designed to help you ponder these things and to start to flex your muscles a little bit as an engaging leader. And that's it. Or at least I hope that's not it. I hope it's a good springboard, this short course, for you to find out more and grow your leadership. If anything in the course confuses you, drop me a line using the Get in Touch form on my website. Or if you want more, check out my other courses or my coaching and leadership support services. Thank you very much for joining me.